talking backstage about your interaction with a Jehovah's Witness, which got a lot of views on your YouTube channel, which is linked down there below. In engaging like that, I saw you just engaging very calmly. What would you say to someone who is intimidated by that? Let's say a
Mm.
Jehovah's Witness comes knocking at their door and they're like, "Oh man, these guys are prepared," or a Muslim, is engaging them, and the Jehovah's Witness, they're trained to engage, right? The Mormons are trained
Right.
to engage. The Muslims are trained to engage. For the most part, I would say that most Christians, maybe even some pastors, are not equipped to engage, and most churchgoers would may be intimidated by moments like that. This episode is brought to you by our Revo Report Patreon. Join our community to get first access to interviews, Bible study guides, devotionals, and prayer books for adults, youth, families, and marriages. Plus, resources on Christian living, leadership, sermon prep, exclusive Q&As, online Bible studies, and even one-on-one coaching or counseling. Visit patreon.com/Vince Revo and grow in faith and truth with us. What's going through your mind, and what would you say to someone who they want to be able to engage in these skeptics at a high level, like what we saw you did? How can they better equip themselves? Where do they start in being able to do that? You did that on the internet. Maybe there's some people who want to be able to do that in person, online, video, in chat.
Okay. So let's I want to touch on a couple of things first. Um, Let me give you a story about another time a couple of Jehovah's Witnesses came to me. It was actually Halloween Day. It was October 31st, interestingly enough. And we were talking to them, and my first question usually is, um, have you always been a Jehovah's Witness? And most people actually say no. There's been a few who were born into it, but no. I said, and they always usually come in pairs. It was an older gentleman and another gentleman who's a little bit younger. I said, well, can you tell me, your story? He goes, well, I was going to a small Christian church, kind of like you, and we had some people visit us from the Watchtower Society, going door to door, and just like this, it was before a holiday. Matter of fact, it was before Christmas. He goes, and I was a 17-year-old young man, and he shared with me certain things, like, for example, Jesus wasn't born on December 25th. I had never heard that before. And after, we talked a little bit, and they said that they would come back, I went in and called my pastor. And he says, Pastor, I'm talking to some guys, and they say that Jesus wasn't born on December 25th. Why are we celebrating Christmas? And the pastor said, are those guys Jehovah's Witnesses? Yeah. He goes, well, you don't have to worry about them. Don't just ignore them. And he hung up. And he said, I stopped and I thought, wow, if my pastor is lying to me about this, what else is he hiding from me? And he began to follow the witnesses. So not engaging can be actually detrimental in some respect. Now, I'm not saying that you have to come out and know everything all the time. But that's just one story of saying, ignore them, hide, go away. It's not necessarily the best approach. I understand how people want to put their best foot forward. And I also understand how these things can be very, very emotionally charged. But here's a couple of things that we need to understand. First of all, everybody should have reasons for why they believe what they believe. If you just take something at face value without any kind of understanding behind it, most people usually have some kind of understanding. A lot of belief is caught rather than taught. You hear your friends say it, or it looks good in a film or something like that. And that's the belief because you're at net zero. Okay, that sounds good. And then you move on until you've explored it a little bit more. But you need to have some kind of belief of your faith, but that includes your interlocutor, the person that you're speaking with as well. So my first rule in witnessing to folks, first of all, is slow down. Okay, you don't have to try and get to the gospel message in the first 30 seconds. And secondly, ask more questions, make fewer statements. You need to, what happens is when you start asking questions, you can find out a lot about people, and you can hear them in areas and in ways that you may not have thought about before. So there was a lady who came to the door with her daughter passing out watchtowers. And believe it or not, I don't get that many Jehovah's Witnesses. As a matter of fact, I usually have to move around because once they find out where I live, they kind of X off the address, and I never
put that house on the blacklist.
But this was many years ago. I'm going to say about 10, 15 years ago. A lady came to our door with her daughter. I wasn't home at the time. My son answered the door, and she asked to talk to one of your parents, kind of thing. And he goes, well, my dad's not home right now, but I know he'd love to talk with you. Can you come back on Saturday? Right now, he said that because Saturday was my birthday and he hadn't gotten me anything yet. So he got me a Jehovah's Witness. Anyway, so the lady came in back on Saturday, as she had promised. I was impressed with that. And hi, how are you? I'm, member of the Watchtower Bible and Tract. Say, well, I understand. I've done some research on Watchtower and your positions. There's some things that don't fall into agreement with historic Christianity. I always use the word historic Christianity in that regard. And, like what? What do you mean? Well, like the nature of Jesus, whether Jesus is divine or not. And so she starts pulling out the Jehovah's Witness kind of regular spiel. And I said, well, wait a minute. Can I ask you a question? Have you always been a Jehovah's Witness? And she said, well, no, to tell you the truth. I said, well, that's interesting. How long have you been a witness? Just a couple of years. I said, okay, well, what changed your mind? What was it about this system, this position that you found attractive? You see, that's an important question, right? What is the motivation that you have? So she said, well, I'll tell you, I grew up with an older brother. Now, I loved my older brother dearly, she said. I really did. He was just the one I looked up to. He goes, but my older brother, he was born with some intellectual disabilities. He was born with some birth defects, and they would cause him to act out in certain ways and do certain things. And sometimes some of those things were, well, kind of evil, kind of unspeakable, kind of cruel. But I love my older brother. We had this relationship. Eventually, he gets to be an adult, and the health issues he had caused him to pass away at an early age. And it just crushed me because I knew, given the things that he had done, my older brother couldn't be in heaven. But I couldn't stand the thought of him being in hell. So I started off on a religious quest to understand heaven and hell and how these things work out. And after 3 years, lo and behold, I found that Jehovah's Witnesses have the truth about these issues. And so that's why I'm a witness. Okay. So now, if you understand anything about the Jehovah's Witnesses, they believe in annihilationism. So once you die, you cease to be. They don't believe in hell. Okay. So if you know that, if you're at least well read enough in the basics of what Jehovah's Witnesses believe to understand that they don't believe in hell, if engaging this lady in Granville Sharp's Rules of Greek Grammar to show that Jesus is actually God, is that the place to start now? Or does my entire conversation switch over to the idea of, what is necessary for someone to be redeemed, even from actions in the past, or are they, accountable? What's the age of accountability? Does that imply something in terms of right? I can talk about faith and forgiveness in historic Christianity, and that's going to go a whole lot farther than it is with these guys. So
Mm.
that's part of the issue. Like, why do you believe what you believe? What can you tell me more about that? And what happens is, as you continue to ask questions, two things occur. First of all, you're not making any claims. So there's not like, I have to defend this, right? Christians always think
Mm.
that they have to answer every objection that everybody throws at them. Well, what about the problem of evil? And how did Adam get his, or how did Cain get his wife? Or what about, et cetera, et cetera. And there's usually, you could throw about 5 or 10 objections on most of them are usually smoke screens. But in the reason giving game, it goes two ways. You get to ask questions of their faith. Well, why do you hold to that? What does that mean in this instance? How do you understand this position? Because if you know Christianity really well, if you know your belief system really well, then you can start spawning the counterfeits, right? It's Walter Martin used to say this all the time. It's the folks at Scotland Yard, when they're investigating counterfeit bills, they
Mm.
don't train their folks on all the different types of counterfeits that are out there. What they do is they sit with them and they let them feel what a real currency note feels like. You look into what the real is, and then any deviation from that you can spot right away. And so that's one of the better approaches. And you need to know the basics of things like, okay, Jehovah's Witnesses, they link Jesus with Michael the archangel. They